All right. You know, I realize I start every single one of our classes by doing that. All right. But tonight we are on page 159 of my book. I've got the paperback version that has both The Way of the Pilgrim and our current book, The Pilgrim Continues His Way, in it. And the priest is about to begin speaking. We've gotten some wonderful teachings on prayer and just how prayer is really what keeps the mind pure, purifies the mind to begin with, but then also keeps it pure. And by pure, we mean just no me and mine in there, no self-interest going on. That's what constitutes a purity in the spiritual sense. Impurity is, we normally associate those kinds of things with sexuality and whatnot, but it's much more inclusive than that because that has a root, and that root is selfishness. Generally, it's not always that way, but generally, if it's being practiced for getting something or for enjoying something, it's selfish in its orientation. So he's saying that by using the prayer or by using your mantra, that you can purify the mind, which helps you still your mind. You can help rein in your senses and keep things under control so that you can store that energy, that sense of life within you. And I don't know much about the Patanjali. I gave a class on it once, but it was a good class. I enjoyed it, but it was my first classes ever. It was back when I was still living in San Francisco. Swami Prabhutananda asked me to do a class on Friday nights. And when I told him I was going to do Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he got big eyes like that. He went, oh, very good. But what he really told me was, you've gone over your head. But we had a wonderful time with it. But anyway, so he's this prayer, this repeating of the name. He says, he gave us these 6 points, which I'll read through real quick, just the first lines of them. One is to steep your mind in thoughts of necessity, the excellence and fruitfulness of prayer for saving your soul, for helping you grow. So that's the first, to steep your mind in positive thoughts, in helpful thoughts. About your practice, about your relationship with the divine, about your day-to-day. So keep a positive spin on your mind. 2, make yourself firmly convinced that God absolutely requires prayer of us. So make it an important part of your practice, central even, that communion with the divine. Really stretch the boundaries of prayer, because eventually it's going to encapsulate everything you think, everything you say, and everything that you do is actually prayer. And so to come to that, we have to be constantly aware of the presence of the beloved, who is the receptor of all of those prayers. And 3, always remember that if you are slothful and careless about prayer, that you won't make any progress in your devotion. So slothful or avoiding, putting it off or not sticking to it or not taking it seriously, which is the big struggle. I have to say, this morning, I kind of was going through that. I was doing a meditation, I don't know, around 11 or so. And the mind, it was going pretty nice. I was enjoying it for a little bit. And then the mind just kept slipping out. I kept discovering that it was thinking about family or thinking about cars or any number of things just slipping out. So be on guard when you pray to make sure that you really work on manifesting that sincerity and that earnestness in your effort, each time you repeat the name of God or each time that you consciously talk to God. 4, enhearten your resolution by example of the saints who all attained holiness and salvation. So yes, spend time with the saints. Talk, with all of the great saints from any tradition. Any saints from any tradition they're always teaching the same things, and they're always extremely inspiring. The stories of their lives are amazing, regardless of what background they're in. And oh, you know what? I was on the wrong page. I gave you today's lesson instead of the 6 from yesterday. That's all right. We'll keep going. All right. So the professor, who's in this little band of 3 right now, we've got the Shkimnik, who is the rishi, as it were, the guru guy, and then we've got the professor, who's just a worldly professor, and we've got our pilgrim, and they've been having this conversation about prayer. And so the professor says, truly, prayer is a great matter. An ardent frequency of it is the key to open the treasury of its grace. But how often I find a conflict in myself between ardor and sloth. How glad I should be to find the way to gain the victory and to convince myself and arouse myself in continuous application to prayer. And who of us doesn't feel like that? I think that that's a feeling that probably follows us to the grave. Where we just always wish that we had what Thakur had, that deep longing, that deep focus, that deep wonder of God and desire for God, the knowledge of God, to have the knowledge of God, to see things properly, and to not get, lollygagged, to not get distracted by the world, and to take these things less serious than they are. We seem to make a lot of room for ourselves, and so he's saying, prayer is obviously this amazing powerhouse that introduces us to grace and virtue and the divine, and brings us to our realization. And he ends just by saying, I just wish I had more of an ardent, strong tendency to dig in. And how do we develop those strong tendencies? We develop them with our samskaras. So what you're doing in this moment is creating your samskaras of tomorrow. And so if you work hard at being focused and being serious and sincere in your practice, if you do it today, that's going to be a little bit of a samskara to carry off tomorrow. And you just keep doing that, and in time, it will produce its own momentum, its own strength, and then your effort kind of just adds to that. And so that's the part about keeping those thoughts alive, those positive thoughts, and keeping the effort alive, and saying the mantra each time like it's the first time instead of like it's the 40,000th time. The Shkimnik. Many spiritual writers offer a number of ways based upon sound reasoning for stimulating diligence in prayer. Okay, so he's going to talk about stimulating diligence in prayer. For example, 1, they advise you to steep your mind in the thoughts of the necessity, the excellence, and the fruitfulness of prayer for saving the soul. So you have to witness these things. You have to put prayer into practice. And by prayer here, we mean all the forms of prayer, but more focused on mantra or doing japam. In their case, it's the Jesus prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. That's their mantra. And so that's the prayer that they're generally talking about when they're talking about repetitive prayer or contemplative prayer. It's following that mantra to the silence behind it. And it's very similar. It's exactly the same, actually, as our Vedantic japam practice. And so, keep your mind and thoughts on the necessity, how important it is. Don't let it slip away from you. Stick to it all the time. Add to it as much as you can, depending on your person type. Work through your guru. Your guru will help you do it in the right way. For me, I had to put the reins on in the first few months, because I would always get too excited and try to do too much, and then I couldn't maintain it, and then I would quit everything. Don't do that. Number 2, make yourself firmly convinced that God absolutely requires prayer of us, and that his word everywhere commands it. So just know it's fundamental. It's fundamental to us. Number 3, always remember that if you are slothful and careless about prayer, you can make no progress in acts of devotion, nor in attaining peace and salvation, and therefore will inevitably suffer both punishment on earth and torment in the life to come. at your own hands, even. Because the less that we keep the mind close to that center pole, to that divine love, the more that our mind wanders and gets caught up in things, the more we suffer. The more pain we endure in this world, and that confusion is self-feeding. Once you get spinning out on things, the mind will just wander from one to the next continuously. What does Thakur say? That the worldly mind is like a drunk monkey stung by a scorpion. Is that all of it? Is there more to it than that? But that's the state of mind. And really the only way to get beyond that is the mantra and settling back into the peace within. Number 4, enhearten your resolution by the example of the saints who all attained holiness and salvation by the way of continuous prayer. Although all these methods have their value and arise from genuine understanding, yet the pleasure-loving soul, which is sick with listlessness, even when it has accepted and used them, rarely sees the fruit of them for this reason, that these medicines are bitter to its impaired sense of taste and too weak for its deeply injured nature. For what Christian is there who does not know that he ought to pray often and diligently, that God requires it of him, that we are punished for sloth in prayer, that all the saints have ardently and constantly prayed? Nevertheless, how rarely does all of this knowledge show good result? Every observer of himself sees that he justifies but little, and but rarely, these promptings of reason and conscience, and through infrequent remembrance of them, lives all the while in the same bad and slothful way. And so, in their experience and godly wisdom, the Holy Fathers, knowing the weakness of will and the exaggerated love of pleasure in the heart of man, take a special line about it. And in this respect, you put jam with the powder and smear the edge of the medicine cup with honey. They show the easiest and most effective means of doing away with sloth and indifference in prayer, in the hope, with God's help, of attaining by prayer to perfection and the sweet expectation of love for God. So all these things that come out of this relationship, this attention, this focus is the power by which we transcend. It's the power that straightens the path inside. By being aware of that awareness within us, it pulls things in the proper direction. It purifies the mind. It clears the way for you. And in that clearing of the way, all of these other truths come in for you. That love of God deepens. That relationship with the beloved becomes real. And we find an energy, a desire for more. That longing begins to awaken. So really all of the things that you would think about asking the Swami at the end of the retreat for, how do I do this and what do I do that? Really the one answer is prayer. The one answer is focus on your japam. Do it with a full heart. Each time that you do it, try and say it perfectly for the first time. And that will lead you to all of the rest. You don't have to go working on 10,000 different things in your character or in your mind, or today I'm going after this weakness, or tomorrow I'm going to work on that strength. It's not like that. God is the one that's activating within you, and it's God who will bring you to your perfection, and it's God who will bring you to your realization. And so just hang with God, as it were. Just be in that japam. And, that japam can be hard for a long time, but there will come a time, where it will become sweetness to you. It'll become a great joy and strength to you. They advise you to meditate as often as possible about the state of your soul and to read attentively what the fathers have written on the subject. They give encouraging assurance that these enjoyable inward feelings may be readily and easily attained in prayer, and say how much they are to be desired. Heartfelt delight a flood of inward warmth and light, ineffable enthusiasm, joy, lightness of heart, profound peace, and the very essence of blessedness and happy content are all the results of prayer in the heart. All right, so this is why we do it. It's actually not why we do it. We do it for its own sake, but these are the things that happen if you have a dedicated prayer life, if you have a dedicated japam practice, and you're working it with sincerity and earnestness. So just look, I'm going to read that again, just because this is the encouragement that you'll get a heartfelt delight, a flood of inward warmth and light, ineffable enthusiasm, joy, lightness of heart, profound peace, and the very essence of a blessed and happy content. All are the results of prayer in the heart. By steeping itself in such reflections as these, the weak, cold soul is kindled and strengthened. It is encouraged by ardor for prayer, and is, as it were, enticed to put the practice of prayer to the test. As Saint Isaac the Syrian says, joy is an enticement to the soul. Joy, which is the outcome of hope blossoming in the heart, and meditation upon its hope is the well-being of the heart. This is when we notice the changes, when we notice the deepening, that there is a bit of a jump in the soul for a moment, an inward happiness, like, ooh, this is really changing. Things really are going forward, and it's by continuing with that we find ourselves changed. I mentioned quite often that as I look at my 20-something years around the monastery and in this practice, when I notice the things that have changed about myself, they aren't the things that I was working on. They aren't the things that I thought needed to be changed. That they were things that kind of I had to notice after some time that they were different. They weren't even on my mind. And I think that is the best way to go forward. Don't think about your weaknesses. Don't think about the things you have to work on. Work on one thing, and that is the constant remembrance of the presence of the beloved through your mantra, through prayer, through song, through dance, through walks, through nature, through anything, by any means possible. Keep your mind in the company of the divine, and everything will be taken care of. Mother will do it all. Just be in that presence. Let it grow in you. Let that scent of that beauty linger. The same writer continues, at the outset of this activity and right to the end, there is presupposed some sort of method and hope for its completion. And this both arouses the mind to lay a foundation for the task, and from the vision of its goal, the mind borrows consolation during the labor of reaching it. So there's that borrowing of consolation, where we enjoy the time with God, even prematurely. We may not have reached the level of getting waves of bliss or having intoxicating moments of company with God. That may not be there, but just to know that that's irrelevant to the divine. Mother is with you right now as much as she's going to be with you on the day of your realization. The only thing different is your awareness of it. That's the only difference. And so right now in your prayer, if it's dry, just shut the mind up, because it's the mind that's telling you it's dry. It's not dry. Mother is fully present in you. Shut the mind up, and in that silence, feel it. Let it arise. You're made of bliss. You're Satchitananda. That's what it means. You're made of bliss. If you're not feeling that bliss, it's purely distraction. It's purely noise in the mind. It's all the things swirling around in there. If you silence it, you will discover bliss. If you silence it, you will discover peace. If you silence it, you will discover contentment. This is the promise, and you can borrow on that, meaning that because this is an effort of grace, right? Because this is all because of the love and kindness of the divine spirit, because of that, we don't have to wait for a succession of actions on our part to enjoy it. we can take that grace and fold it around us like a big fluffy blanket and enjoy it now, long before we've become saints, long before we've had samadhi or any kind of visions or insights or whatnot like that. We can sit in that joy because it's a gift. And it's not based on time. It's not based on effort. It's not based on accomplishment. It's based on the love that the divine has for you. And your acceptance of that, your embrace of that, will be directly related to your sincerity and your earnestness and your love of truth in yourself. Being honest always for where you are, being the witness, watching the mind closely, doing the things necessary to help train the mind, to guard the mind from going outward, prevent it from going into the world of change. Always direct it back to the heart. Anytime any of those thoughts come up, you should catch it immediately. That's the kind of watcher we need to become, where we immediately, as soon as the mind brings up the slightest tinge toward the world, toward the senses, that we catch it immediately. We're like, om. And you put it back in that mantra, back in the presence. And say that mantra until you feel the bliss, And you feel the bliss just by enjoying the mantra, actually. The mind borrows consolation during the labor of reaching it. In the same way, Saint Asiki, after describing the hindrance that sloth is to prayer and clearing away misconceptions about the renewal of ardor for it, finally says outright, if we are not ready to desire the silence of the heart for any other reason, then let it be for the delightful feeling of it in the soul and for the gladness that it brings. So he's giving you permission to do your practice because it's enjoyable, to do your practice because it's fun, even though you might not have all of the things perfectly aligned inside. You might not be desiring it for its own sake. You might not be desiring it for the release and freedom in it. You may be just doing it. Excuse me. You may just be doing it, as a discipline. And he says, don't get hard on yourself about that. If that's the case, do it for the fun, do it for the enjoyment, if for nothing else. And really, I think that's the most beautiful thing. Enjoy God because God is enjoyable. Enjoy love because love is beautiful. Enjoy that company because it's the only company we ever really have. And certainly, when we lay down our last time to exit the world, it will be our only company then, the only meaningful company, because none of the company in the room will be able to go with you. You're going to have to close your eyes, and all you will have at that moment is what has been there in your practice. And so if your practice has been sincere, if your prayer has been deep, it's going to be a beautiful experience, that moment. It'll be an amazing experience. But to the degree that we're slothful or lazy or distracted, to that moment we'll be afraid. To that degree we'll be afraid in that last moment, or we'll be distracted in that last moment. So it's always good, I've done it a few times, to lay there and imagine. I did it one morning at the monastery in Hollywood. I was laying in bed, and it just occurred to me, I thought, what if this was my deathbed? What if I knew I was never going to get out of this bed? Sort of betrays my laziness, because that's sort of what I was hoping at the time, that I would never have to get up. But this this notion of laying there and understanding, like, wow, what if this is it? What if there's not going to be any more hikes? There's not going to be any more beauty outside. There's not going to be any more friends. There's not going to be any more places to go or things to eat or taste. This is it. I'm in this bed until this body drops. If you can stay in the moment, that won't bother you. If you can stay in the moment, that will be fine with you, because all of the contentment and all of the joy and everything that you spent your life looking for through the senses, Mother has taken away all of those options. And in that absence of ability to go and play, you will see that you never needed to. you'll find your fulfillment. You'll find your peace. You'll find your joy. So this meditation, this practice of ours, you know, it would be a helpful thing perhaps to sit and do it in that way. Sit at this moment and think, this could be the last time I don't get up from here. I don't go and do anything more, and learn to be okay with that. Allow yourself to be okay with that and to accept the presence. It follows from this that the Father gives the enjoyable feeling of gladness as an incitement to the assiduity in prayer. And in the same way, Macarius the Great teaches that our spiritual efforts of prayer should be carried out with the purpose and in the hope of producing fruit, that is, enjoyment in our hearts. Clear instances of the potency of this method are to be seen in very many passages in the Philokalia, which contains detailed descriptions of the delights of prayer. One who is struggling with the infirmity of sloth or dryness in prayer ought to read them over as often as possible, considering himself, however, unworthy of these enjoyments and ever reproaching himself for negligence in prayer. Right, for the same reason that was it Brigu we read yesterday in the Gospel, or the Tuesday, that we don't approach God by our effort. We don't take solace in our efforts, in the quality of our practice. We always take solace in grace alone. And so we should never forget that everything that we have is a gift from the Beloved, that it's not a matter of achievement on our part. And that way we can really relax into that grace and find it without effort when we accept the fact that it's a gift, that it's coming directly from the Mother. The priest now comes in and says, will not such meditation lead the inexperienced person to spiritual voluptuousness, as the theologians call that tendency of the soul which is greedy of excessive consolation and sweetness of grace, and is not content to fulfill the work of devotion from a sense of obligation and duty without dreaming about reward? So he's asking, is this not just another form of spiritual materialism? Materialism is when you just go out and you're just looking to suck enjoyment out of the world. And he's saying, if you do this for your practice, isn't it just the same thing of going into your practice to just suck enjoyment out of spiritual life? It's like, isn't that just another form of worldliness, of getting stuck, becoming voluptuous, loving the voluptuousness of our practice? And the professor says, I think that the theologian in this case are warning men against excess or greed of spiritual happiness, and are not entirely rejecting enjoyment and consolation in virtue. Yeah, because it's not even a choice. When you act according to your nature, it's going to be enjoyable. It's going to feel proper. It's going to feel right. And when you're engaging with absolute love, with an unconditioned love, it's going to be overwhelming. It's going to lead you to ecstasy, And so there's no way around that. He says, for if the desire for reward is not perfection, nevertheless, God has not forbidden man to think about rewards and consolation, and even himself uses the idea of reward to incite men to fulfill his commandments and to attain perfection. Honor your father and mother. There is the command, and you see that the reward follows as a spur to its fulfillment, and it shall be well with thee. All right. If thou wilt be perfect, go, sell all that you have and come and follow me. There is the demand for perfection, and immediately upon it comes the reward as an inducement to attain perfection. And thou shalt have treasure in heaven. Blessed are you when men shall hate you, and when they shall separate you from their company, and shall reproach you and cast out your name as evil, for the Son of Man's sake. There is a great demand for a spiritual achievement, which needs unusual strength of soul and unshakable patience. And so, for that, there is a great reward and consolation, which are able to arouse and maintain this unusual strength of soul. For your reward is great in heaven. For this reason, I think that certain desire for enjoyment in prayer of the heart is necessary and probably constitutes the means of attaining both diligence and success in it. And so all this undoubtedly supports the practical teaching on this subject, which we have just heard from Father Skimnik. So don't worry about enjoying your prayer. don't worry about doing your prayers because you enjoy the presence of God. It's all right. That enjoyment is a gift from the divine, and it's born of your own nature. You're not needing anything from outside to produce that joy. That's what makes it okay. Because the joy that you find from within, the contentment that you find from within, is your very own. It's always available to you. It's yours. It doesn't require a slavery or a bondage to something external in order to get that joy. It's what you carry within. And so this is why the desire for God is never considered one of the desires. It's not wrong to desire God, because God you already have. God is already your own. So it's not a matter of getting God. It's a matter of realization, a matter of realizing that God's presence has never left you, that God's love has never excluded you, that the grace and the wisdom of God has always been imminent, present in this moment. This moment carries all of it within itself. And you are this moment. You're not in this moment. You are the moment. And to come to this knowledge, to come to this acceptance, this is an overwhelming joy, an overwhelming bliss. The Skimnik, one of the great theologians, that is to say, Saint Macarius of Egypt, speaks in the clearest possible way about this matter. He says, as when you are planting a vine, you bestow your thought and labor with the purpose of gathering the vintage. And if you do not, all your labor will be useless. So also in prayer, if you do not look for the spiritual fruit, that is, love, peace, joy, and the rest, your labor will be useless. And therefore, we ought to fulfill our spiritual duties, prayer, with the purpose and hope of gathering fruit, that is to say, comfort and enjoyment in our hearts, right? Because that's that little verse from Micah that I like to throw around. What is it that the Lord requires of a man but that he enjoys his work and walks humbly with his God, right? That's the only requirement. There's no forbidding of enjoyment, as I like to remember what Vivekananda says. Religion is not about outlawing enjoyment. A religion is about teaching you how to enjoy so that you don't get caught. So how to enjoy this world so that you don't get caught into it. So there's nothing wrong with this enjoyment, with this deep level of enjoyment in the presence of God. Do you see how clearly the Holy Father answers this question about the need for enjoyment in prayer? And as a matter of fact, there has just come into my mind a point of view which I read not long ago of a writer on spiritual things to this effect. The naturalness of prayer to man is the chief cause of his inclination toward it. So the examination of this naturalness, in my opinion, may also serve as the potent means of arousing diligence in prayer, the means which the professor is so eagerly looking for. Right? This is our nature. This is our nature. We grow to enjoy these things because of that, because they are our nature. And so if we just remember that, become aware of that, watch, and all of this is betrayed to us through watching, through that careful attention within. This is how we find the things that really give us joy, and we let go of the things that only pretended or gave us such a temporary shot of joy but didn't give us anything lasting. This is why that inner awareness is so utterly important. And that's the diligence in prayer is just another way of saying that. To be diligent in prayer means to stay awake, to stay focused. So, all right. Let me now sum up shortly some points I drew attention to in that notebook, For instance, the writer says that reason and nature lead man to the knowledge of God. That's that internal discernment, reason and nature. So that internal discernment, that awareness, that watching, and your nature, Satchit Ananda, these are the things that lead you to knowledge. These are the things that unfold you as a devotee. The first investigates the fact that there cannot be action without cause, and descending the ladder of tangible things from the lower to the higher, at last reaches the first cause, which is God. The second displays at every step its marvelous wisdom, harmony, order, gradation, gives the basic material for the ladder which leads us from the finite to the infinite. Thus, the natural man arrives naturally at the knowledge of God. And therefore, there is not, and never has been, any people, any barbarous tribe, without some knowledge of God. As a result of this knowledge, the most savage islander, without any impulse from outside, as it were, involuntarily raises his gaze to the heavens, falls on his knees, breathes out a sigh which he does not understand, necessary as it is, and has a direct feeling that there is something which draws him upwards, something urging him toward the unknown. From this foundation, all natural religions arise, and in this connection, it is very remarkable that universally the essence or the soul of every religion consists in secret prayer, which shows itself in some form of movement of the spirit, what is clearly an oblation, though more or less distorted by the darkness of the coarse and wild understanding of heathen people. So this really speaks to that notion that religion is one. You know, of course, he's going to use that distortion of heathen people to kind of prevent it from having its natural conclusion. But it's part of us. It is us. You know, that is this notion that religion is not a thing. It's not separate from us. It shouldn't even have a name to it because it is one with us. You know, our life is religion. Our questions, the big questions of life, are the seeds of religion. Man has been wondering throughout his entire existence, what's up? What's going on here? You know, what is this body? What is this mind? What are we engaging in here? And you know, for the sincere seeker, the questions can be answered, are answered. And Mother has answered them around the world throughout the ages to those who wandered off and sat in stillness and really wanted to know, what is going on? Who am I? And what are you? What is this other? The more surprising this fact is in the eyes of reason, the greater is the demand upon us to discover this hidden cause of this wonderful thing, which finds expression in a natural movement toward prayer. The psychological answer to this is not difficult to find. The root, the head, and the strength of all passions and actions in man is his innate love of self. The deep-rooted and universal idea of self-preservation clearly confirms this. Every human wish, every undertaking, every action has as its purpose the satisfaction of self-love, the seeking of man's own happiness. The satisfaction of this demand accompanies the natural man all through his life. But the human spirit is not satisfied with anything that belongs to the senses, and the innate love of self never abates its urgency. So there it is. Don't look out there. The world can give you nothing but thoughts in reality. And if we don't see it that way, then at least understand that the world can give you nothing that's going to last. Everything that you buy is going to have to be replaced. And to replace things, you're going to have to work for them. And if you're working for everything that's going to need to be replaced, you're just going to work. You're just going to work and watch things wear out and then hope you have enough money to replace. So let go of that round robin chasing of a whirlwind. Let go of that and believe that the answer is within you. Believe it. When you're sitting there thinking, your mind brings up desires like, oh, I wish I could go over to the cafe and just have a cup of coffee and sit there and read a book. Understand that that's a lie. Yeah, it'll be an enjoyable thing in and of itself, but it's unnecessary. It creates a habit that's going to cost you money and take your time, and it's not going to be helpful for anything lasting. As soon as you get done with that time at the cafe, your mind's going to come up with the need for the next time. So instead of following the restlessness of the mind, go behind it and just sit and just test God. Say, okay, look, I really feel like going to the movies, or I really feel like, calling up my boyfriend or my girlfriend or whatever. Instead of doing that the mind is prompting you through desire, say, I'm going to actually try and do some japa here instead, to see if I can actually find contentment in that, to see if I can actually find some bliss in that, some enjoyment in that. That will answer me in a way that going to the cafe or doing any of the other cascade of things that I normally do for my entertainment or my distraction. Test your practice. Test it and see. Sit down and do a sincere and earnest 10 minutes of japam instead of doing whatever else your mind had come up with, and see what happens. This is discernment. This is experimentation. I think that a healthy spiritual life is full of experimentation, full of wondering. Like, gosh, I wonder, like this morning I got very excited because we found a scripture in there that had said so, that had verified something that I had thought from one of my experience, for several of my experiments actually in my spiritual life. But I had gotten a little, not nervous about them, but I do put them in a place in my mind when I think of a truth that I think is true, but I haven't read it anywhere yet. I keep it sort of in a temporary space, a holding space. I'll still talk about it and whatnot and use it, but I'll always have my eyes open when I'm reading a scripture to see if I can find that idea mirrored in the saints or mirrored in the instructions somewhere. And if once it's been made fact that way, then I pull it out of the temporary box and put it down in the working zone. Like, yep, this is a reality. This is true. And we go forward. And so do those experiments. When you find your restlessness, when you find the mind just running to get you to go do things, see if you can teach that toddler to be content with a moment of sweet silence, a moment contemplating full love within. And in time, those things present themselves as more than real. Not that they just become real to us, but they present themselves as more than real. And so desires develop more and more. The endeavor to attain happiness grows stronger, fills the imagination, and incites the feelings to the same end. The flood of this inward feeling and desire as it develops is the natural arousing to prayer. So it's really all of those things that you're looking for in worldly things, you're looking for the experience of deep prayer. You want power, so you look at money. You want security, so you look at relationships. You want pleasure, so you look at substances. You want, you want a sense of being, so you seek fame. And so you go looking at all these outside things, and none of them deliver any of that to you. None of them deliver that to you. If you observe the world closely, you get that message right away. I mean, those people who have money and power and fame, look at them. There's plenty of them to look at. Look at them. Is there great joy there? Is there anything different about them than about us? That don't have that level of those things. You'll see there's if nothing, there's more suffering because they have more to lose as they age and as the body goes and as their life comes to its conclusion. Observe Be a very careful watcher inside and find the truth. The truth is the only satisfaction that lasts lies within you. And it is to be found through your careful practice of looking deep within, finding that center, finding that heart space, and establishing yourself there. It is a requirement of self-love which attains its purpose with difficulty. The less the natural man succeeds in attaining happiness, and the more he has it in view, the more his longing grows, and the more he finds an outlet for it in prayer. He betakes himself to petition for what he desires to be the unknown cause of all being. So it is that innate self-love, the principal element in life, is a deep-seated stimulus to prayer in the natural man. So he's just saying what you're going to find out through discernment, that your only desire is for God, for that abiding and lasting inner peace, and that you've broken that up into 1,000 different objects in the world and stuck little names on all of them as being things that you want. But ultimately, it's your desire for God being reflected through your confusion that has created objects of desire for you. Once you realize the real nature of the objects, that they don't really exist, that they are ephemeral, that they're but a wave in the mind, when you are able to abandon them, to renounce them, you turn away from them and you turn inside and you discover the most beautiful thing you will ever discover, that which you will know no other way, the nature of your very own self, infinite, immortal, love itself, steeped in the deepest of wisdoms. The all-wise creator of all things has imbued the nature of man with a capacity for self-love precisely as an enticement, to use the expression of the fathers, which will draw the fallen being of man upward into touch with the celestial things. Oh, if man had not spoiled this capacity, if only he had kept it in his excellence, in touch with his spiritual nature, then he would have had a powerful incentive and an effective means of bringing him along the road to moral perfection. But alas, how often he makes of this noble capacity a base passion of self-love, when he turns it into an instrument of his animal nature. So this longing inside for the divine, when we identify with body-mind, we create objects of enjoyment, ideas of enjoyment. And that is that animal mind just means the mind based on body mind, or the sense of being based on body mind. Instead of on our spiritual nature, you are a spirit. So food isn't going to fill you. The things of the world, the material things of the world are not going to give you what you need. That's why we call it spiritual life. And that's why we call it spirituality. It's the process of living as a spirit and not as a body mind. Knowing ourselves to be spirit and not to be body mind. Closes this chapter with this little paragraph, the starets. I thank you from my heart, all my dear visitors. Your salutary conversation has been a great consolation to me and taught me, in my inexperience, many profitable things. May God give you his grace in return for your edifying love. And they all leave his presence. So we'll stop there because it's a perfect place to stop.